This presentation is based upon the TSLG model that was introduced in a prior video that I made. I'm Dr. Greg Parsons, and the purpose of this and the prior other videos related are to help students in developing their dissertation project. This particular presentation is going to deal with the development of a stream of literature. And again, this is one of the troublesome areas, as students are not exactly sure how to go about this. And what I'll be trying to do here is show how this relates to the very first part of the dissertation process that I mentioned before. If you haven't seen this or want to review it, the link is available up in the upper right-hand corner of this slide. But what we're going to be doing here is looking at a single stream of literature, and as I mentioned in the previous presentation, you're going to need two, but you need to know how to do one first, and then how you're going to build it from a body of literature into a stream that supports the development of your gap and your topic. All right? So this is the part of the process that this presentation is going to deal with. To get started, first we need to distinguish between bodies of literature and streams of literature. Many times they're used somewhat interchangeably, but I think to understand what we're trying to do here, we need to think about bodies of literature as being a huge conglomeration of articles that have evolved over a period of time, especially in the social sciences such as business or psychology or sociology or anthropology or political science, anything having to do with human beings. Bodies of literature will come from a wide variety of areas, usually based upon some foundational theory such as Porter's Five Forces and strategic management, or Bass's transformational leadership in leadership theory, or Friedman's efficient markets theory in economics. So this theory will be developed, and if it's well accepted, people will start to write about it, and it'll begin to collect a lot of peer-reviewed journal articles from different fields published in different journals. This all contributes to what we call a body of literature. If a body of literature has been around long enough, there will be different schools of thought developed. For example, in psychology, there would be the Freudian school of thought and the Jungian school of thought, and there would then be different forms of psychology. There would be social psychology, there would be abnormal psychology, there would be clinical psychology, and each one of these would have their own theories and approaches to be used. So you can end up with a huge body of literature related to a particular field in the social sciences. And consequently, you'll be dealing with millions of published articles in thousands of different journals. So obviously we can't work with an entire body of literature. What we need to do is think smaller, think about a stream of literature, which will be a group of articles selected from the body of literature that have to deal with a particular aspect of a particular theory, based upon what you plan to do with it, what's the use of it, what's the research question you're trying to explore, and what are the particular articles that support the work in that particular question. So you're only going to be looking at the literature related to your specific research interest. It will require a searching, because you'll be searching like in an ocean of literature to find a particular series of articles that contribute to what you want to do, but that's part of the exploratory process. It's like going exploring for dinosaur bones. You can dig through a lot of dirt before you find a bone, but that's the process. Let's focus on creating specific definitions and terms, so that by the time you're finished, you will have a small group of articles that everybody in those articles tends to agree that this is what you're trying to do. These are the definitions of the terms. These are the studies that contribute to the understanding of what we have. And in general, you are on solid ground for moving ahead and developing your own research question. And this is the point of the literature stream, is it leads to a question, or if you want to call it a gap or a topic, in a logical process. And I'll be going into that more in future slides. So how do you do it? Well, the first step is you have to start with a general awareness of the literature in the field, the body of literature, so you know which are the theories that are available. Then, as you begin to focus in and develop your particular topic that you want to work with, then you're going to start to focus. And you have to start to think, well, how is the particular literature that I'm looking at in this particular area, how is it going to lead to a particular question that I can answer? Okay, so that's the beginning point. You figure out where you want to work, and then you start to think of how is the literature going to help me show that this is a good question to deal with. First, you have to determine where you want to start. What's considered the foundational literature? How far back do you want to go? Many of the topics dealt with in social sciences, were discussed back in Greek times. The nature of leadership, the nature of quality, the nature of beauty. So a lot of things have been around for a long time, but you don't always want to start out with the ancient times. You want to find something that's really relevant to where you want to begin. And then you need to determine how much of the related literature is required. How much is too much? How much is just the right amount? In a dissertation, generally you're looking at probably 30 to 50 pages of literature review. Okay? That's in general what we kind of end up with in the social sciences. Why? Because there's a lot of literature that's been written about it and is continued to be written about it, and you have to demonstrate that you know what the authorities are saying about it. Also, sometimes things are outside of the particular area that you're working with. You may be working in business, but you find a lot of the leadership literature comes from psychology or applied psychology or sociology. So you have to determine how far outside your particular field you need to go to show that you're covering all the bases. And then the biggest problem, of course, is deciding how to focus it down, how to narrow the literature stream down into a specific thing that you can work with, that you can actually do research with. So you're going to be looking at what's considered the latest research in the field, okay? Who's working with it? And then you're going to have to develop the rationale. Why are you including the particular literature you are? How does it start in one point, and what does it lead to in the end? Why are you including this and not this? So you have to, in your own mind, understand why you're including something, what it means, and why you might not be including something else. Because you might get asked that question. It's sort of like, why haven't you looked at so-and-so? He wasn't mentioned in any of the work that you're showing here. He has a lot to say about this subject. Okay, so you got to make sure you cover the majority viewpoint, that you demonstrate that you know everything that's been important to your particular topic, but on the other hand, you can't include everything, otherwise it won't make any sense. It won't lead to any definite conclusions. Then when you write your literature stream, you got to connect it together. The pieces all have to flow together. You're not simply saying what this article said. You're not describing articles or writing article reviews. You're trying to pull the main ideas out of these articles, out of the literature, and then connect them together according to what you're going to use it for. Now, I think going into a little more specific example might be useful now. So, developing a literature stream, steps 1 and 2. Well, the first thing is you need to start with a general awareness of the literature in the field. And if we're using leadership as an example, you need to realize that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different leadership theories out there, and more being developed all the time. Well, you can't deal with all of those. And whoever is reading your paper doesn't want to deal with all of them, unless you're doing a review of the field. But generally, you're trying to do something that's more specific. So out of all the different theories out there, the great man theory, the traits theory, the behaviors theory, the contingency theories, the transactional theories, the transformational theories, the servant leadership theories, out of all these leadership theories, you're going to have to come up with something that you want to work with, a particular aspect of leadership theories. Okay, so the next thing is to determine out of all of these what's going to be the focus for your research topic. And just let's assume that out of all these you decided you want to work with leadership competency theory. Okay, so there's this big mixture of things going on, and one of the more recent developments is this new theory called leadership competency theory. Then the next steps in developing your literature stream, steps 3 and 4, need to determine where you want to start. What are going to be considered the foundational theories? Okay, so for competency theory, if you look back at the literature and what's been written prior to it, they evolved out of trait theory and behavioral theory literatures. And those theories were kind of amalgamized and synthesized and added to by Stodgill, White, McClelland, and others in that late 1940s and early 1950s time. Okay, and out of these theories develop the competency theories. So then you need to determine how much related literature is required to really focus on and define what are the aspects of competency theories that you want to work with. So now you'll be looking at the current modern models of leadership competencies, and you'll be finding articles written by Silzer and Thornton and McClellan still writing and Bray. So you kind of move through an evolution in history for earlier theories, what we call seminal or foundational theories, how they evolved into the modern version of the theories that you're going to base your research on. The next step is to see how far you need to go. What aspect of competency theory are you planning on using? Again, generally these are so wide that they don't tell you enough to be focused in. You need to demonstrate that you understand them, but really now you need to pick something out of that general body of theory that is going to be useful for your purposes. So suppose you decided that what you're interested in doing is seeing if there's a relationship between competency theory and leadership style theory. Okay. So this starts to focus it in. You're not interested in everything that's been said about competency, but you're trying to look for whether the factors of competencies are related to the factors that drive a particular leadership style and make it effective. Then you need to determine the rationale. Why are certain literature being included and why is some being excluded? And because of the nature of the topic you want to work with, now you're going to say, well, I'm only interested in literature that's related to competencies and how they affect a leader's ability to execute a particular style. So that's now narrowing the focus down to a specific area. And then finally, step 7, to write it. Now that you've chosen the literature, now you have to tie it together with a connecting theme. So how does each article that you plan to include, how does it tie to the other ideas in the other articles that are being included? And my suggestion is generally, even when you're just writing a paper, and of course with the dissertations, you start with a thesis statement that states what this stream is going to do. The stream will show that leadership competencies theory provides a proven model for determining specific demonstrated attributes of leaders. Okay, there you've laid it out. This is what you're going to do. Now you're going to use the literature that you've selected to build a logical flow from earlier literature, back with the Stogdill and White and those people, to the current literature that provides a logical supporting leg for your research question. Okay. Now the other leg is going to, of course, come from leadership style theory. Okay, so you're going to have to develop another literature stream from that. But this supplies one leg that says this is a valid area of research. It's been established. It's been validated. There are instruments to use that can test this. So this is a good, solid place to work. And you've narrowed it down far enough that you can actually see what your research questions and what your topic is going to be. Okay. So that's the way that it works. That's the steps that you need to go through. When you're constructing the stream, it's not a simple process. It's going to be ongoing. You start out with a general idea based upon your understanding of the bodies of literature that you're working with. Whether you're in marketing or international business, you should become familiar with the literature and the various theories and areas of research that are out there. And thus you become more focused in on what you might be interested in doing, what seems to be a logical area. Then you look up the available literature. You may find that there's nothing in the area you were thinking of doing, or you may find that there's too much. You need to refine your search. You may find that everything you were thinking of doing has already been done. So as you do more searching and more reading, you'll find a better focus on what your topic could be. So the results are going to come from the existing research. As we say, you can only develop new theory out of existing theory. And the research topic will evolve. Okay, you don't start out with a topic and then try to look for something that is going to support it. You start out with the literature and find out what's available to do. The process is iterative, meaning that there's going to be a definition of the topic, and when you go to search for it, you may find things that then inform you that that's not the right topic, or you need to adjust it a little bit. So you're going to be going back and forth between exactly what the thesis is, what the topic is, and the theories that are going to be necessary to be able to support it. And of course, the more you learn, the more you find out that you don't know as much as you thought you did, and there are always new avenues. And one of the problems that some students run into is they keep on going down different tracks, and they find out something that seems more interesting than what they were working on. Well, again, this can lead on forever because of the availability of electronic database journals. You can find a lot of information about a lot of different subjects. So part of the process also is working with your advisor and your committee to kind of stay focused on something that's going to ultimately be doable in the form of a dissertation. Now, another little example might be useful, because a lot of times what we say is look at the peer-reviewed journal articles that you're reading. Now, there may be a variety, but a lot of them follow the same form that we're talking about here in constructing a stream of literature. So I'm going to be working with the article from LDR 813. The title is Reexamining the Components of Transformational and Transactional Leadership Using the Multi-Factor Leadership Questionnaire, sometimes called the MLQ. So this actually reflects what the thesis statement is, what the paper is trying to do. It's going to examine the components of leadership, transformational, transactional leadership, specifically looking at the multi-factor leadership questionnaire. So it's fairly narrow. So how does the author decide what his stream of literature is to support this, examining this particular question? Well, one of the authors of the article is Bernard Bass, and since he sort of was the author and inventor of transformational leadership and the MLQ, a lot of the reference material is referencing his own work. Okay, but he doesn't just stick with that. He also goes and quotes Burns and Conger, House, Robert House, and goes on Cotter from Harvard, and a variety of different people that builds up his support for saying that doing this, looking at this particular question, examining this, is a valid research study. Okay. So he's got the literature. Now he's got to start to organize it. So he starts out by saying Bass, referring to himself, conceptualization of transactional and transformational leadership includes 7 leadership factors. Okay, and from these factors, he created a instrument, a questionnaire, that then was used to collect information to determine whether a leader fell into the transformational category or fell into the transactional category. But of course, when this was published, it raised issues of, well, who says those are the 6 or 7 most important factors? Are those the right components? Okay, so he's trying to trace through this part here the origination of the theory and the instrument, and then talking about the various viewpoints that have been expressed through the literature over the past 20 or 30 years. Then he starts to narrow it down to specifically what he wants to do. And he's not going to talk about the theory of transformational leadership. What he's going to talk about is the MLQ survey. Okay? And then he goes into, again, some more literature that express some different viewpoints. Okay? And now that all the previous literature has been defined and shown how it leads up to the current study, we need to link it to what the current research is going to be. And here Bass summarizes the objectives of the current study. And one of the things he says is we're changing the approach. We're going to use a different statistical method called a confirmatory factor analysis rather than the original, which was the exploratory factor analysis. So we've got now 10 years worth of published material that has provided us with new insight. And so we're going to be basing it upon some of the comments that other people have published. And there's a second reason, which is we want to use a new method which provides more stringent tests of the factor structure in the MLQ instrument. And then finally, one of the things is to determine whether the MLQ instrument was actually measuring the factors that it was developed to assess. Okay, so he's got 3 main reasons, but all these are built upon comments and published material from others, as well as his own colleagues, that have looked at the MLQ with regards to how it was used in transformational leadership, and it has been used a lot, so there's a lot of published information about it. And he's saying, well, maybe it's time to go back and review it. Maybe we know more about the results that it produced and whether it can be improved. So here's 3 reasons, but it's all backed up by the prior literature stream that Bass provided to show that this is a valid study that he's doing. Now, as I mentioned early on, the field of social sciences, including business management, psychology, sociology, and so on, are complicated, and they have many related fields because they deal with human beings. So once you start talking about human beings, there's a psychological aspect, there's a sociological aspect, there's organizational aspects, there's all kinds of things that can be drawn in because human beings behave motivated by a variety of different sources. Okay, so one to look at here is that shows the relationship of different fields is complexity theory, which in recent times has become fairly popular and used in a variety of areas. In fact, there's a leadership complexity theory. So here we have at the very top of the umbrella the main body, which is complexity theory itself, and we have the literature that relates specifically where people are writing about complexity theory. But you can see, because we're talking about people and organizations and a variety of things, there's a lot of supporting literature that might need to be included in your literature stream. For example, there's another field called knowledge management. Then there's all the stuff about organizational learning. And because we're talking about complex systems, there's issues of culture, a field of study called knowledge barriers, and then knowledge transfer. So if you're writing a complete literature review and your topic happened to deal with a lot of these aspects of the supporting literature, your literature review would have to delve into all these different areas to show that you really understood how these various subgroups fed into the overall theory of complexity, sometimes called chaos theory. All right, so it can get to be a fairly complicated process, and that's why it takes a lot of time. That's why we try to steer you into areas that actually can be done in a reasonable amount of time, and stay out of the areas that are just too broad or too vague that you would never get a good stream of literature. So to wrap this up, social sciences will generally be broad and include a variety of journals and cover many different topics within a general category. And as I mentioned, leadership has hundreds of different theories. And because of certain theories have been around a long time and have collected a lot of interest, such as transformational leadership, they'll be their own body of literature. And if you want to work within transformational leadership, you'll have to develop somehow a stream out of that, because there's no way you could cover the millions of articles related to transformational leadership. The stream of literature, as opposed to the body of literature, is going to be an exclusive collection of publications that creates sort of a logical progress that starts with earlier literature and moves up to more current literature, and also narrows down to the specific topic that you want to work with. Our classes that you're taking are designed to expose you to the main theories. Okay, we can't do all the possible streams of literature. That is up to you when you start working with a particular topic. So you should be aware of the bodies of literature in your chosen field, but you certainly will not be exposed to all the various theories and all the various directions it can go. That would take you the rest of your life. When we look at particular peer-reviewed journal articles, each one, or nearly each one, will always contain a literature section where the author presents their stream of literature, or streams of literature, that leads to the particular topic their article is going to work with. So they work as a very good example of how you do this. You just have to kind of pay attention and look at their reference lists of where they came from, and that provides you with all kinds of not only examples, but other sources that you can use for your own work. So this has gone on quite long enough, and I hope you were able to, maybe it's better to watch it in several sections. But anyway, the purpose again was to provide you with a direction and a motivation for working with streams of literature, and to give you a little more explanation of how and why it's done. So until next time, I'll sign out. Goodbye and good luck.